Welcome to Surviving Society.
So welcome to Loco Parentis. I'm your host, Twayna Mayne. Loco Parentis is a podcast that centres the voices of those who as children were cared for by adults other than their birth parents. I describe that cohort as being those who've been in care, those raised by kin, grandparents, other families, members, for example, and adopted people too. I'm joined today by Rose and Paul from the Care Experienced Movement, a collective of care experience activists working towards creating a better future for all care experienced people in the UK.
So hi, I'm Rose. My pronouns are they, them. I am co-CEO at the movement with Paul. So at the movement, we very much have a very wide definition of care experience. So we don't just include those who have grown up in adoption or kinship or fostering. We also include those who have spent time in a secure unit. And including those who have sofa surfed or just been in respite for a week or two. So if you've had an abnormal, in quotation marks, experience of growing up, then that counts as being care experienced.
Cool, thank you, Rose.
Hi, I'm Paul, and also co-CEO of the Care Experience Movement, doing maternity cover for Isabel, our wondrous founder.
I'm care experienced. I was also adopted as well. But sometimes I think of myself as being more care experienced than adopted, because I was adopted quite late. I was adopted when I was 14, by nearly 15 by my foster mum, who'd fostered me since I was 3.
Oh, wow.
But in a way, I sort of identify less as being an adoptee. I do kind of know why that is. It's because the adoption bit came quite late in my childhood. I've always kind of had an interest, I suppose, and especially in the last few years, about being in care, how I've learnt about being in care, mostly from people who have not been anywhere near any of those systems. And so I think it's kind of important that we have care experienced people telling our stories.
Very much so. And that kind of very much centres what the movement does. So we only hire people who have that lived experience of the care system. There are lots of organisations out there who do fantastic work with the care experience community, but they're not led from the top down by care experienced people. We're also quite radical in the fact that we pay everyone for the work that they do. We very much try to stop the trope of just getting paid in Amazon vouchers or love to shop, as my local authority did. And we also make sure that all of our members are well supported. So we also pay counselling costs as well. So people can either find their own counsellor, we can help them source one, because working with your care experience is going to be really traumatic.
Yes. And
we want to make sure that we're kind of ending the cycle of re-traumatising people just for clout or for their story or whatever.
Who do you work with?
Each other. So reaching out to various other organisations and local authorities to do lots of work with. Just before I'd been in my role, Rose and Isabel had done some work with a couple of local authorities, and we're doing a report on the report of the independent care review.
Yeah.
Worked with a couple of local authorities with that, and some young people, and that was some really great work. Trying to navigate doing some more of that, whilst also getting ourselves stabilised and able to, get everything sort of figured out in the background, so that we can start building the networks and build the movement and a sort of membership platform as well. Yeah, something I was sort of instigating recently was to do a reading group. So we're going to have that online very soon, which is just a sort of easy way in, kind of like this, have a conversation with the background premise being just the book that we've read. So that's just sort of incremental work to start getting people interested and engaged and seeing how we can talk about our experiences, but maybe not necessarily like they could be indirect. So we can be talking about a book, for example, and it's not quite so overwhelming because it's
I just want to add on to the back of that we've done work with we've done consultancy work, so we've done work with Frontline, who obviously train student social workers, and we contributed to their Summer Institute programme last year, at which point we actually got the opportunity to basically tell student social workers what they should be doing as care experienced people that have grown up in the care system, and how they can really centre our voices as they go into quite a very, very hard work profession. And we've also done work with missing people, for example. So they are a fantastic organisation who obviously help families that have been affected by those who have gone missing. And we did work on how they can support and train other professionals to deal with care experienced people who've gone missing from care. So I use a lot of my lived experience within that piece of work, that kind of there's a system in place that isn't there to protect care experienced people, it's to protect the litigation for the foster carers or for the local authority, which is a fantastic piece of work. And we've also done work with Anna Freud, delivering our training programme as well, which is fantastic. So that's really good as well.
You brought up your lived experience, and for me, I hadn't really thought about owning it as an identity until the last couple of years, and maybe that was partly due to the pandemic and a way of re-examining myself and starting doing therapy and stuff. But so I was interested in like how long you may have had that for yourself, and because I think
I'm in the middle of that, to be honest.
Yeah.
I think growing up, we were very aware of what was going on. It's not like it's not like we were too young to know, and then it's like we didn't have. There's like I have memories of a lot of stuff. I have memories of being with my birth mum. I have memories of first meeting my foster mum and moving between those two places for a few years. I have memories of being 6 when we were no longer seeing like my birth mum, and sort of being stable with my foster mum, who I'd been with since I was 3. So when I say we, I mean me and my older brothers.
Mm-hmm.
Being in care, and how you sort of, for me, it felt quite stable. We didn't move around a lot, but then every now and again there'd be adults would have a meeting, and then we'd have the discussion at tea time about the meeting, maybe, and then you just keep going on with your life, and then just different processes would come in, and then it was like, oh, this has come up when I was about 8 or 9. It was like, we'd like to, the suggestion had been for my mum to adopt us. And so then it's like me and my brothers go off and have a discussion about that amongst yourselves, see how you feel, come back, and then the adoption process would go on. And then getting adopted quite late at sort of being all teenagers. My brother's a year and a half older, so they got adopted when they were 16 and a half. So we were all quite old, really. But we all just were happy about, when I say happy, we were happy just having a day off school, to be honest. We literally had a day, and we thought this was brilliant. Yeah. Kind of been slightly sort of like indifferent about it, to be honest, even though when I sort of look back and think about it, there's a hell of a lot of shame, actually. I have just been like, that's the one thing, and I've spoken to other people about it who understand, who maybe have had sort of difficult childhoods and understand that it's like the shame bit has always been the bit that's always just like, it just makes my heart sink. But it wasn't until literally when I was doing, because I do a bit of stand-up comedy, but when I did a show and I talked about being fostered and adopted. And so that's when I think I started to tell people out, strangers literally on a stage, that's when I think I was started to be like, well, this is who I am, to be honest. Yeah. And I'm not ashamed of it. And I've never really been ashamed of it, but I'm also not proud of it either. It's just like, this is just who I am.
This is the thing that happened.
This is the thing that happened. Yeah, do you know what I mean? And it's like, I'm more interested now of hearing, like, seeing different depictions of adults who've had a care experienced childhood. Because if somebody turns around and says to me, well, if it wasn't for that, you'd be in prison. It's like I get told stats about what I should be.
Yeah.
And it's like, but actually I've met lots of people and they're not those people. So do you know what I mean? So this is why.
Yeah, so we very much concentrate away from statistics. So many people have done that research. The research is out there if you want to find it. We don't care about the statistics. Yeah. At the end of the day, the statistics are currently stacked against all of us as care experienced people. And obviously, if you start adding in like other minority identities and stuff, then the statistics are even worse against you. But like, for example, our training is all based through lived experience, but we stay from the get-go. Like, we're not going to do the statistics. If you want them, go look on the government's website. They've got those statistics. We don't care. Yeah. I think a lot of us try to fight against those statistics. I didn't go into care until I was 16. Okay. So for a very long time, I didn't feel I was care experienced at all. I felt like a bit of a cheat and like I didn't really belong in the community. And it wasn't until Isabel, our co-founder, and my co-CEO, Paul took over. It was until she was like, you are aware that because you've had social service involved since you're 6 or 7, you've been care experienced since you're that age. And like, even if you hadn't had that until you're 16, you're still care experienced. Yeah. And the other thing as well is like my care experience was pretty good. The second I went into foster care, like I was suddenly surrounded by a very healthy dynamic of what a family looks like. I was allowed to push the boundaries without it getting really bad or anything. And to be fair, my placement only broke down after I turned 18, and I started to rebel a bit too much for my staying put position. So even then, I come like, oh, well, do I actually get to have a say? Because my care experience is actually kind of okay. But again, that's something that we do at the movement. Like, we never ask anyone's care experience. If you want to bring it up, you're welcome to do so. But there's no kind of pressure to do so. We're not hiring you for your story. We're hiring you for your expertise as being a care experience person.
Because I think at the moment, like, we exist in this space at the moment. It's like, tell me your story. It's like, actually, I've heard a lot of stories now. We've got more to offer than just, here's my story.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? And at the moment, I find that's my problem with a lot of adults in this space at the moment, as like care experienced. It's just like, let me tell you my traumatic story, and then you can just like.
Yeah.
I really do kind of use the phrase trauma porn.
Yeah,
it's that kind of having to kind of say, oh, you know, I've had it worse than you. My care experience is more valid, which is a massive challenge we face within the care experience community itself, isn't it?
Well, there's something to be said for what you've both been saying. How there's an empowerment in finding your voice, and like, you know, that feeling that you get from being like, oh, okay, I can lay claim to this. I don't need other people to narrate my life. You know, whether it's the bureaucracy of the forms or just the stigma or the perception that other people have. And then it's moving from that like individualized personal narrative to a more collective narrative, which I guess what we're trying to bridge between is there is lots of very empowered care experience people that have gone on to do various things, and we hope that we are encouraging people to do that. But we also need to build something collectively together, because if we're not doing that, then it just becomes that sort of neoliberal dynamic where you're just it's out to improve your own self. It's not working to improve.
It's like what? Because it doesn't really change anything. It's like you obviously want to change the system.
We want to change so much.
Where would you start?
Oh, well, so this is the thing. Like, we have so many different veins of that we want to go down. Like, our theory of change is very wide things, from creating community hubs to, for example, Paul's reading group that he's just started up, which is going to be a fantastic opportunity to get more involved with the community, because so far our contact with the community has been quite limited, mostly due to funding and mostly due to the fact that, unfortunately, Twitter is a dying space, and unfortunately a lot of care experience people are on there and that sort of thing. Like Paul mentioned, we did our work with 2 local authorities last year, so that was in response to the government's review of the independent review that was done around children's social care in England, and we had the really fantastic opportunity to work with Brighton Local Authority and Wolverhampton, and that was 40 young people, and that was absolutely fantastic. But even that was kind of a shame, because they didn't even know this care review had happened. So most of our session was actually teaching them about it and then trying to get their feedback. We have strategy to work hopefully with government. We wanted
to care experience review about the care experience community, which the community didn't really know much about.
Yeah. So
everything's so fractured, isn't it? It's like we don't. Yeah, if you're still within care, you're kind of more connected, and as soon as you're out of care, you are on your own. You know, you're just trying to be yourself amongst everyone else.
Yeah.
But how can we, like, how do you find people that?
Because I found obviously like thing. Lots of people found each other on the internet.
100%.
Because I didn't really meet many care experienced people, I suppose, until social media, really.
Yeah.
So Isabel, who's our co-CEO, we randomly met because she became my neighbour. And I mentioned about being in foster care, and she's like, oh, I was also foster. And Isabel was the first adult care experience person I'd ever met in my life. And it kind of just shocked my brain, because like I thought I was a rarity. Unfortunately, when I was in care, my local authority very much pushed for, unless you wanted to go into hairdressing, childcare, construction or beauty, they wouldn't want to help you. And there was this other care experience person who was off, and she was doing drama as her undergrad, and it was like, oh my God, like this is a thing, like I can go and do more. I was told that when I went to university the first time round, I was only one of 5 people in my local authority that year to go to university.
From care? From care. Wow.
Which I thought was absolutely insane. And even that's been a push. I turned 25 in May, and my local authority have a thing that they will pay you on each year of completion. And I had to proper fight, because they were like, well, no, you're 25 now, we're not going to support you. And I'm like, well, no, you had an agreement to do this for me. Just because I've turned 25 25 does not mean you should have any less responsibility for me. And again, something the movement does is we don't have that age cap.
Yeah.
There are a lot of big organisations out there with very big names who are always the first people there and with government to do work around our care experience.
Yeah.
And unless you have an interesting story that they want to keep peddling, the second you turn 25, you're on your ear. And that's not good enough. They don't get to come in and take our stories, put us on Channel 4, give us £25 Amazon vouchers. That's not good enough. And that's what we're here to do. We're trying to stop that.
Yeah, and
I got really angry there.
And yeah, just having that, in that space again to come together at any age and be like, because care is for life. So it's a fundamentally political thing. So we need to, just be able to recognise that and then see where our power lies when we can come together.
Because I was in care and then being adopted and then just sort of thinking it just sort of ends with the adoption. I'm out of that now.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, adoption is something else. And these things, like you've just said, they're for life. They're not like, they don't have, like, once you're 18, you're out of care, or once you're 18, you can find your birth family. It's like, all of these, it's like, no, like, that's not how it works.
The biggest thing that kind of kicked me out the butt to join the movement was I had my daughter at 21, and 2 weeks postpartum I received a letter from social services saying that now that I was an adult and had my own child, I no longer needed their services.
Oh my.
And I remember complaining about it to Izzy, our co-CEO, and I was like, what the hell? And she was like, well, at some point we've got this opportunity coming up, like, you should definitely interview it. Can't guarantee you'll get the job, but like, you should definitely interview it. You have the passion there. And I interviewed, and obviously I got the job originally as development lead and then onto the co-CEO. It's just this disparity. Like, I'm not, but if I'd grown up in a normal household, like, I wouldn't have been kicked out, hopefully, for having a child and all this sort of thing. Like, there's this, you don't kick your kid out at 18, you don't kick your kid out at 25, you don't kick your kid out at 21. Like, so why does the government think that's okay to do?
With a certain cohort of the country, it's like, we're spoken about sometimes as like, these are our children. It's like, well, I'm not your child.
No.
I'm not your don't claim me. We are not your children. So many people are like, our children. You're like, no, stop.
Yep.
Yeah.
But doesn't mean that you shouldn't care, but it's like, don't.
And it's when they try to take credit for our achievements that we've worked our, excuse my French, but we've worked our asses off to go for. My local authority does not have any gain or traction or congratulations for me, I don't know, getting a distinction in my BTEC. Because like, I did that. I worked my butt off. You didn't help me, like, to the extent that there was another person on my course who was care experienced, and we had the same PA, but my PA liked her more, so she was given funding for her qualification, whereas I didn't. And there was no difference between us. Like, we should have equally gotten some money, and it came down to a popularity contest. And it's just not good enough. But no, they do not get to take credit for me. And I know that Isabel would say the exact same about her undergrad.
Yeah.
And we are a product of our relations. Like, the bureaucracy of like government and local authorities and stuff is just it's not really you don't build a relationship. You can't, because
we're not
it's so
people,
structured.
we're paperwork.
Yeah, none of it's structured to actually like benefit people.
But this is the thing though, because people are like, the system. It's like like systems don't care. Like, systems don't care.
Yeah.
Like, people within systems might care, but also people within these systems are geared to working towards the objectives of the system.
Yeah.
And so that's where I think people get a bit confused about care. The use of like care within the care of children, but like state care, it's like
it seems oxymoronic.
Yeah.
Like,
when you sit down and think about it a lot more, you're like, it's.
There's a dichotomy within people's brains around that, I think. But for example, like, I was at Buy Pride representing the movement on Saturday, which is a fantastic opportunity. Met some lovely people. We got quite a few donations, which was lovely. But the amount of people that would come past and be like, and they saw my stick and they're like, oh, so this is around like adults who are under social care for disability and stuff. I was like, no, it's not actually. I'm an adult and I'm talking about my care experience, and we try and help you. Like, and the amount of people be like, oh, I thought that finished like 16 or 18 or whatever. And it was only when I was speaking to like a couple of people who had mental health professional like experience and all this sort of stuff. They're like, oh, okay, I can completely understand what you're doing. Like, this definitely needs to change and all this sort of stuff. And it's like, that's fantastic. And they took our leaflets around our training, but like, there's just this, okay, well, I'm glad you're passionate about it, but you're not care experienced. So are you actually going to go back and tell your bosses? Like, I hope they do. And I really hope I go back this afternoon to loads of emails from them. But there's just this, is it just tokenistic, or is it actually a genuine need to want to change the care experience, the care community?
I think people don't have a clue, to be honest. They don't have a clue about families and the reasons why children come into care. They don't understand. One, I also think they don't want to understand. And I think the don't want to understand is kind of major. They're not. I think there's not an. It's like, and people think it's down to like individual failings. Like, oh, this person is bad.
Yeah. This
is why their children are not there. And you're like, actually, some people are bad and they still have their children. And you know what I mean? And it's like, it's a lot more it's like every situation is unique. There might be similarities that run through those situations, but actually it's a lot more nuanced than anybody realises.
And not only that, no care experienced person has asked to become care experienced. We haven't asked to be put into care. We haven't asked this. And even if we have, like, there's a good reason why we have. But again, it comes around to this narrative around care experienced people, the fact that there'll be villages campaigning against having a children's home built because there's this narrative that care experienced people are going to be bad. They're going to do arson. They're going to do crime. And it's always the same narrative. It's not about, well, actually, no, those children need a home. Like, would you want your kid out on the street? No, you wouldn't. You'd do everything you could to help them. So why is it okay to do that to a stranger's child? And I think it kind of reflects entirely on our government at the moment, including Labour. I don't think there's been much of a change since the Tories have gone out now. There's this distinct lack of care. They do not care about us as individual people, care experienced or not. Like, we are just a way of getting money from us, a statistic. We are not people. As I said, we're not people, we are paperwork. And that needs to change. Yeah.
And it's massively intersectional as well. There is so many, like, every single thing overlaps with care experienced. And it needs to be considered in that broad way, that big umbrella of like, well, what does it mean to care as a society? Like, this could be the most revolutionary thing, this movement and the recognition of care experienced people, because it could really pivot society's reflection of itself and be like, well, we actually need to care about each other. We need to do the work.
Because even like, if you can't care for, like, quote unquote, the most vulnerable people in the country, the most vulnerable young people with care, then that doesn't really hold up much hope for everybody else.
Yeah. No, definitely. It's like the debates around abortion. I will openly admit that I've had an abortion myself. And like, there's this also says, oh, well, you know, you shouldn't have an abortion or whatever, or like, you shouldn't adopt as children out there. And like, care experienced people are only used as a narrative, for example, around the pro-choice thing, when it comes as a nice little thing of like, oh, well, you know, you shouldn't have an abortion, you should just put the child up for adoption, put the child into foster care. Well, okay, if you so care about that child, then why the hell aren't you fostering? Why the hell aren't you doing a change? Like, we're not just a little nice little, like, a broken puppy kind of. Obviously, we had that big thing when I was a kid growing up that puppies aren't for Christmas, they're for life. Well, it's the same for care experienced people. The amount of people I spoke to at By Pride on Saturday, and they're like, oh, well, you know, I know this person who adopted a child, but the second they had their own child, they put the code back into the system. Well, we're not objects, we're people. And like, we're people with feelings, we're people with trauma, we're people that actually, we just want a normal life. Like, we don't want to be a big statistic. Like, I think it's fantastic when you see people in the news, like care experienced people that, for example, have got into Oxford. But like, I didn't get anything in the newspaper when I went to Bournemouth University. Like, just because it's a privileged university, like that person in care has fought every fucking, excuse my French, every stigma and everything against them to kind of change that. And yet, it's never kind of, oh, well, actually, Oxford need to improve their care experience bursary. They need to improve their recruitment process. It's, oh, this person is absolutely fantastic for beating the stigma. Well, no, that's on the Oxford University, for example, to change their stuff. Like, it shouldn't be us having to change the system.
And having like exceptional examples of people is not really the greatest.
No, 100%.
You know what I mean?
Like, I know for a fact that most local authorities who have their children in care councils, they will only have the success stories from their children. They won't have the kid who actually has been expelled from school because actually it's just too much and actually his foster placement is breaking down. It won't be that one. It'll be the kid who's getting A stars. Well, whatever it is now. I think it's not. Is it 9s now? I think it is. They've changed the grade system. Whatever it is. Like, it'll be the kid who looks good on paperwork. It's not the kid who actually should be in that space fighting, because actually they know what it's like for when the local authority is failing and what needs to be changed.
And this is how, like, that point you bring up, this is how we can support one another. Like, we don't have to just be success stories. We can just be like
just normal,
fallible human beings that are like struggling along, and like at different points our mental health's bad, and then we need a little bit more support from our network. And that's to me is what like is at the core of the movement, and the core of what I want to be involved in my life is like building a network of people that if I'm falling on hard times, I don't just feel like I've got no safety net anymore. I've built something up, and there's people that have my back, and I want other people to have that as well, because it sucks when you don't feel like you've got that, and you're just like, oh my god, if I make this, if I try and I might fail at this thing,
because no one, sorry to interrupt, because no one talks about like being an adult, like how to navigate a traumatic childhood as an adult.
No, but you get taught how to budget. That's really helpful, isn't it?
Do you know what I mean? It's like I'm finding that a lot with just every day. I don't really do it so much now because I'm not on Twitter, but I used to go on and just read tweets by like foster parents and adoptive parents, just talking about stuff, and you're like, it's just I used to just do it just to gaslight myself essentially. Do you know what I mean? But it's kind of like, love is great. I'm not saying love, and also I would like to put this out that kids are not in care because they're not loved. I just think that's really important, because everyone's sort of going, yeah, but you didn't get love. You're like, mate, we were loved, okay? Yeah. Just some other stuff was going down. Yeah. Don't worry about it. But also I'm finding that adults, like parents and carers of people, are articulating the feelings of their young people without actually the young person knowing what their feelings are. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. So it's like, that's kind of like, that's my beef.
Yeah, I think as well, for me, it like one of my biggest beefs with the whole thing is when being put into care is used as a threat. I helped out 2 14-year-old girls the other day, and they said that they'd run away from their home before, and that every time the police brought them back, the police would go around and like, well, if you do this again, I'm putting you in foster care. Part of my childhood, my stepdad had grown up through the care system during the 60s, so it wasn't very good and stuff. And he'd always go, oh, well, the grass isn't green on the other side. If you were going to foster care, X, Y, Z would happen to you. And actually, I was a lot safer and a lot happier in my foster placement than I ever was in that house. But like, being put into care shouldn't be being used as a threat by anyone. Like, it shouldn't be. And also, like, if it is being used as a threat, then what does that say about our care system? What does that say that actually it's the thought of being put into a foster placement that actually should be caring and nurturing and should be a place where you can grow and learn to be much more healthier and stuff, is then used as a genuine fear, like being put into prison or whatever. Like, it says a lot about our social care system in general. Yeah. The
media and culture as well. Like, one of my first memories is my mum's partner, who was abusive in various ways, threatening that the child catcher was going to come and take us away. And I was just like,
bang, bang. He terrified me. He gave me so many nightmares as a kid.
Exactly.
Like, I can't even watch it now. Like, I'm like, oh no, I'm going to get taken.
Yeah, I'm not even sure I had the cultural capacity at that time. It was like earliest memory, but he did. So he was using it as a tool to like and a threat. And it's like, no, that our culture is messed up if that's what we're saying is what happens. You get thrown into a system because we can't deal with you.
And then again, it ends up becoming either we're superheroes or supervillains. Yeah. Like, we either become serial killers or we're these big, wonderful superheroes. Like, well, no, we're just ordinary people. Yeah. And then, but then there's the other way as well. That it then gets glamorized. So the amount Isabel, our co-CEO and our founder, her dissertation on her undergrad was around how Tracy Beaker is a really bad example of social care system. And like, she would get tweets saying that she saw loads of tweets that like, oh, I wish I grew up like Tracy Beaker. Like, no. Jacqueline Wilson, I think, has a lot to answer for. Especially as someone who grew up reading all of her books, like, I idolized it. I was like the amount of books that are problematic as well, like Love Something. And it's like a student her teacher's kissed her and it's romanticized. And like, all the other books, it's so problematic. And like, I grew up, obviously I said I went to care at 16, and like, I grew up reading Tracy Beaker, I grew up reading the Hetty Feather series and stuff, and it's all glamorized, and just, it's not this romantic notion of the care system. Like, it's not going out and having fun with all your friends. It's being told you have to be back by 10 o'clock, otherwise you're getting the police called. It's, I can't give you a haircut, I need to get permission from social services. Like, you can't have a sleepover because you have to do a safeguarding plan. We have to vet the parents.
You can't get your inoculations because you have to
I remember telling one of my partners that I had to have permission to have my hair cut, and they looked at me and they're like, "What?" And I was like, "Yeah, it's seen as bodily harm.
Yeah,
Like, it doesn't matter if I wanted it or not. Like, my foster mum had to get a written permission to show a hairdresser. And, like, this was a hairdresser who cut my hair when I was a child. Like, it made no sense for this to be a thing.
It's such an odd situation to find yourself in. Because in that situation, you are sort of unusual.
Yeah.
Amongst your peers.
100%.
Because not everyone's has to you're like, no, I can't have the jab today because the social worker hasn't come back with the form saying that I can have my BCG. Whatever it is. I had it late. I couldn't believe it.
Yeah.
But yeah, just that normalizing of things, like make those difficulties just a normal, like, well, not normalizing the difficulties, but normalizing the relationships, normalizing what it means to, which is hard when there's so many nuances and different experience of what it means to be in care and various iterations. So, but normalizing that through the ways we talk about it in the media, in the culture that we have, and the stories that we tell each other. Like, it's easy for us to normalize it because it was normal.
Yeah.
But so it's just part of that. It's like telling the stories, but not making it about the trauma, making it about like, well, it was just how I lived.
But look at me now. Do you know what I mean? As well, because like it's that thing of like, that is part of who I am, but it's not all of who I am.
100%.
And then you sort of move through.
I say that we literally work with our care experience day in, day out. So it kind of is more than just this is who I am. This is literally our day-to-day kind of, we literally work with our care experience all the time. Like in some way it will come up with the work that we do.
Yeah, even the word care, I say that so many times a day that it's just a bit absurd now, but it's almost losing meaning. So it's like trying to
So how many people work at the Care Experience Movement? How many of you are there?
So there's you, me and Isabel. So we are lead roles. Obviously Isabel has just had their gorgeous little baby. So they're on maternity leave and due to come back January time, hopefully. We've had a couple of people leave recently just to other work commitments and stuff. But usually it's a board of about 7 people.
Okay.
But again, like how we co-lead the movement, we have 2 co-chairs as well because we very much are a holistic organisation. We don't see the point in making yourself ill to do a job. So if one of us is down, one of us is struggling, then we can carry on. One of us can carry on doing the work that needs to be done. But it is hard. It's very hard. Like, because it's day in, day out. It's trying to fight the narrative. It's trying to get into spaces. Like I mentioned, we have our training program. Like I've reached out to at least 50 organisations and no one's just getting back to me. It might be because I'm reaching out to universities and obviously it's just been summer holidays, so who knows. But there just seems to be this kind of brush under the rug. Like if they don't work with children, they're not interested. And it's like, it's so much more than the people you're working with being care experienced. It's your colleagues that are care experienced. It's your friend who's care experienced. Like, how can you support them? Like, what are the challenges that they face? Like, one of the biggest ones we always talk about is like going to the doctor and being asked your family history.
Oh my gosh. That's like
I've just had to sign up to a new doctor's surgery because I've just moved to a different town. And it's a doctor's surgery I used to go to when I was a child. So like, I'm hoping they'll be able to find it because I sure as hell don't know. Like, I know that my dad has some heart problems and that's about it. And they're like, oh, well, how do you not know that? I'm like, well, I grew up in care. And they're like, oh, but surely the social services did something. I'm like, did they? No, they did not. They did not do anything. I have, because apparently I'm in my local authority, when you leave care, you're supposed to be given a big document about all your kind of health stuff. And in mine is information about how much I weighed and what I had, what like the jabs and stuff I had when I was born, and then it skips my entire childhood up until I went into care, at which point I know all that stuff. It's completely useless, completely.
Yeah, the medical history is the one that I think, when as an adopted person as well, when you go to the doctors and you're like, what's your family? I'm like, I don't know. And they're like, look, there's like a look. Yeah. There's like a look of like, I am talking to an adult and you don't know. And it's just a look. And I'm sort of say, I'm adopted. And then they look at you again of like, I'm like, yeah, mate, it's you professionals, isn't it? It's you professionals are just gatekeeping all this information.
Yeah, 100%.
Or mixing it up and losing it. I think my sister and I's medical histories got mixed up at some point, so I don't really know what was. And like, I don't even know where that paperwork is anymore, so I'm not entirely sure what
it's this kind of stuff that I don't know, if you can improve systems, it's this kind of stuff.
Yeah, so
you know
one of the
what I
things
mean?
that we do in our training is the joined up thinking. Like, it shouldn't be on that kid for every person they meet to repeat their story.
Yeah.
It's not on me to tell my social worker, my PA, whatever buddy person I put in place of, oh, well, you know, at the moment I'm like, at the time obviously I was at college, like, oh, I'm doing this X, Y, Z. Like, that should be something. And I'm choosing a normal thing here. I'm not choosing something traumatic, because we all have our trauma. It's obvious what I'd have to be repeating all the time. But like, it should be one thing, like everyone reads. Like, I don't understand it. And it's the same for when we do work and stuff. Like, we'll speak to one person in an organisation, and then another person who might even work in the same team has no clue. And I'm like, just talk to each other. Like, I don't know if that's just me being really autistic, but like, I don't understand why you wouldn't just tell someone something that's pertinent to what is going on. I don't know.
I think that there's a lot of something I've been trying to read up on lately is like the history of disability rights, and like understanding that trajectory, and then incorporating some of that, as well as like queer history as well. And like
100%.
because care experience, it's a civil rights issue, and as I was saying before, it's like intersectional. So learning from other movements of the past and understanding how their battles were won, and then seeing what could be applied or what new tactics need to be brought in to be like, okay, this new way of looking and treating our society can be incorporated into this model. So yeah, that's something I've been trying to figure out as well.
Yeah,
it's hard.
because our slogan at the movement is "Nothing about us without us," which is the same as the disability movement, which might have been a bit of the crossover on Bi Pride. I've just thought about as I'm saying that. But I am physically disabled. I use a walking stick. I'm mentally disabled as well. I'm autistic, which I don't think is a mental health disability, but there we go. That's a personal issue. But I'm also queer. I'm trans. I'm pangender. I'm pansexual. And like the amount of crossover between all of my identities and my care experience, I'm quite lucky in the fact that my parents didn't know about my gender identity or my sexuality. I told them post but going into care, to which my sister and my mum turned around and said that I was greedy and I couldn't make a choice. But I knew that if I'd mentioned that when I was in care, when I was not in care, it would have been problematic. But then my care experience is very intricately linked with my queerness. My foster parents were very strict Christians. Like to the extent that I wasn't allowed to read Harry Potter before J.K. Rowling became problematic. I do not read it now. Moldy cow can go piss off. But I left care at 18 after a big fight, and then I ended up actually working for my foster dad for a little bit. And by this point, I'd realised that I was trans as well. And like it'd always be a case of, oh, well, you know, God loves you. And I'm like, okay, that's fab. I agree with you. And he'd be like, oh, but you know, you shouldn't really be that. And it would be always the same fight of like, well, if God loves me, it shouldn't be changed. But my foster parents, being Christian, wasn't told to me. It was only when my foster parents invited me to go to church that I even found out they were Christian. And I went. And my social worker at the time, who was one of the worst social workers I've ever had in my life, in my files, it's written down that my foster parents forced me to go to church. And it wasn't. It's going to sound absolutely ridiculous. I went to church as rebellion because my stepdad never let me go on school trips or anything. So when you go to the school trips like the church or for spring harvest, not spring harvest, but like for harvest and all this sort of stuff, like I wasn't allowed to go. So when my foster dad was like, oh, do you want to come to church with us at 16? I was like, yeah, fuck that. I'm rebelling. I'm rebelling against my stepdad. And so I became a Christian. And like, but even that, like, I really don't think... Because I had told it by this point, my social worker and stuff, that I was queer. I should not be placed in that household. I was really lucky that I got to go up to Parliament at one point for an APPG, and I basically had a massive go at a whole bunch of politicians that placing queer kids with Christian households is bad. And I say that as someone who is a Christian and queer. I think there's a massive level of toxicity around religion and being care experienced. Like, if that person that is care experienced is religious, then they should be placed with someone who is that religion. Yeah. And if not, then don't force it. I think that matching people to their identities is much more important than is currently being done. One of the ideas that the movement has, which won't happen for quite a while, I don't think, unfortunately, is that foster carers get given packs on us. we don't get given a PAX on them. I remember being 16, it was winter time, it was like January 23rd or something, and it was like 6 o'clock at night, and my social worker was driving me to my foster placement, and as I got out the car door to knock on her door, the social was like, oh, you're not scared of dogs, are you? And I'd never grown up around dogs, and I walked in and there was 2 giant golden retrievers and a Rottweiler. And I was terrified. And so one of the ideas that me and Isba had right at the beginning was actually foster care should also have to provide a pack of what the house is like. Yeah. So like you go into a foster placement, you don't know what the rules are. You don't know where the food is. Like I was very shocked that I was allowed to even go into the fridge for food. And my foster mom was like, well, why wouldn't you be? And it's like, well, obviously because I wasn't allowed. Duh. Like it should be the basic stuff like that you already kind of know if you've grown up around the same household, like that care experienced people should know. And this is also coming very much from my neurodivergent lens. I'm autistic and ADHD. Like I like to know the situation I'm going into. Yeah,
but it's that thing as well though when people are like I 100% agree that would be a lovely idea, but people think that you should just be grateful that people are letting you into their house.
Exactly. And so, we shouldn't be. You're doing the bare bloody minimum.
Right, exactly.
But I very much agree that that foster carers should be paid, and they should be paid a decent amount, because at the end of the day, a lot of foster carers, for example, my foster mum, in quote marks, she specialised in troublesome boys, which obviously I was like the second girl she'd ever had, and she's now in her 80s and she's been fostering since she was in her 20s. Like she's been fostering for a very long time. She's still
fostering now?
I think she just gave up a couple of years ago. But she's been doing it for a very long time. But I was told, oh, well, she specialises in problematic teenage boys. And I was like, well, I'm not any of those, I don't think. But like, even then, it was a case of the fact of I've watched from when I was in care. And I left care, obviously, this year, so I'm only just 25. But when I was in care, she got paid, she was able to get money for my haircuts. She was able to get paid if she took me to dental appointments, doctor's appointments. If they had to take me to college, they got paid the fuel for that. I got a £10 a week allowance. And then as I started working for my foster dad about 3 years ago, before I joined the movement, I watched as she had other foster kids in the placement and she didn't get any of that anymore. And it got to the stage of like, well, I'm expected to do this fostering full time, but not have a job. And like, I don't know, there's a lot of talk within the care experience community is whether foster care should be paid at all. I think they should. They're doing a full-time job. My foster mum couldn't work because she had to be at home in case one of my foster brothers ended up needing to be taken out of school or whatever, because unfortunately he was quite problematic in quotation marks. But like, for example, my care experience, that wasn't the case. But they are doing a job.
Yeah, it is a job, isn't it?
It is a job.
Yeah.
Like, and it's a bloody hard job because...
but this is but this is the same as like, I'm going to be like specific, like we don't pay women to care, like to do like household.
Yeah.
It's
unpaid labour. Yeah.
Unpaid labour. It's that. It comes into that space.
Very much.
My thing, and like they're going to be unique for each person and the views and perspectives. But this is why we should probably have like assemblies on these things and get everyone's opinions and get collective opinions. But yeah, had my birth mum been provided with funds, she could have looked after us or had the capacity. Also, she had a network of people around her, which she didn't have at the time. So there's like lots of provisions I can see that could have benefited my unique experience. But then, but it's not the same. Yeah, but at the same time, then the foster parents, we're doing full time jobs and full time care, so needed to have, to be reimbursed for that. But I was also, like, at one point we found a box of receipts and it was just like, oh, so this is what we're worth, and then if you don't feel like you see that, come through in how you're experiencing the world, then it can feel like, oh, well, I'm just that. My
younger brother was adopted by a different family, and they were also foster parents, and so they used to give the foster children in that household like more pocket money, which used to upset my younger brother. But then his parents would say, "Yeah, but you're adopted, so you've benefited more." And it's just like, do you know what? This whole household is such a mess. It's like, just give everyone £5 a week and let it be, like, stop. Do you know what I mean? It's that weird thing of like
the hierarchies.
Yeah, it's just like,
But again, it comes back around to, I can never remember the comedian's name. There's a German comedian who turned around and he said that charity is a failure of government.
Oh, Henning Venn.
That's the one.
Yep.
Yeah. And I very much agree that, like, at the moment, obviously, Labour have carried on the two child cap on the child benefit and stuff. And it's like, there's this thing of, oh, if you're on benefits, you're a bad person, you're a slob, you're lazy. Like, most people that are on universal credit are working. Like, and there's just this innate hatred for anyone who's on benefits. And it's just like, as Paul was just saying, like, if more families had support in place, financial and socially.
Early years support. Do you know what I mean? It's like, 100%. If you're like, there was an article in the paper a few weeks ago about that, if we get rid of the cap, then it means it's like there's less children coming to care, less like, there's a whole thing in there of like child deaths. There's like loads of stuff where you're like why would you want to keep this?
Yeah, 100%. Because I'm currently doing my undergrad, I work on campus at University of Essex, which is where the Data Archive UK is based. And they have so many leaflets there, and it's literally about like social systems and stuff. So like, what happens if you let every child have a free breakfast? And it comes back, and it is very much socialism. I like to say I tried to say I call myself a commie bastard because I'm very much into Star Trek and stuff. But there is this idea of like, if you support everyone, there's going to be so much better. Like, I'm very much a big fan of defund the police. And I'm not saying the police shouldn't get money. I'm saying that if that money that they get is being put into social care programs, is being put into schools and stuff, then the police aren't going to be needed as much, which should be a good thing. And I don't understand why that's so controversial. And again, might be me being super autistic here, that I have very black and white thinking of, if that happens, then this is better. Why is this a bad thing? Kind of thing. And it comes back around to what we want to do in the movement. We want to be that social support system. Another very big idea that we have in the future, once we have more funding in place and more sustainability, is we would like to be able to fund funerals for care experienced people if they don't have that access to that. Because obviously, if you think about it, your family does that. Well, what about if you're a care experienced person who doesn't have any family? You haven't got a partner, you haven't got friends or whatever. Like, the government's not going to help you.
Yeah.
Because the government sucks, as we've established. Like, we want to put more support in for everyone within the care experience community. And like, if we start making it a more holistic place, then there'll be more people in place to help the younger care experienced people. Like, quite a few of my friends at the moment who aren't care experienced, but they've heard me talk about my job. They've started to become buddies in their local authorities. They're going to take kids out once a week or once a month. And they're like, I'm sorry, I can't do more. And I'm like, no, that is the perfect start, because you're going to be an adult in their life who actually gives a monkeys. You're not there for the paperwork. You're not there for the money. You're doing this because you actually want to do it from the bottom of your heart. And there needs to be more like that.
And that's the kind of, like, even that is a radical act. And like, we need more radical thinking in order to get us to places that will take social care into consideration and the ways that we treat each other. So we got to think as wild as possible.
Yeah, we need to stop hating people. We need to stop judging them. Like, and I've said this before, when it comes to like immigration and stuff, like, we all live on this planet. Why are there borders? Like, everyone lives on this planet. There should, and again, autistic thinking, like, I just don't understand it as a concept. Like, why can't we print more money? That would be better. Like, just do it. Like, again, Star Trek, commie bastard over here kind of thing. But like,
in an ideal world, because why not? Because I think we should talk about ideal worlds. What would you like to see, like, in terms of like care experienced sort of people, and as care experienced activists, what would you like?
I'm trying to imagine a world where love and care and freedom are like the founding grounded principles where we make decisions, and I think it can start with people in our positions and experience saying that needs to happen. I think it can be a quite revolutionary thing that we're the ones demanding that we look after each other. So I think just a society that actually values that, and all policies, all economics, every decision that's made is based on those principles, and that's a difficult thing to gauge because it's not quantifiable. It's a qualitative thing.
I think for me, a lot of people would be like, oh, to eradicate the need for the care system at all. And again, coming back to Star Trek, one of the things I love about it is they never eradicate disability. They don't eradicate. And I don't think the care system needs to be eradicated. I think it needs to be supported fully. Someone's always going to need to go into care. There's going to be someone who's had a kid, they can't handle it or whatever, and that kid needs to be put into care. So it needs to be a case of having a space where all parents are fully supported to be parents. And then if that is completely impossible because they've tried absolutely every avenue that's been fully funded, fully supported, then there needs to be a care system in place where that child is listened to throughout the entire process, regardless of their age. There is no such thing as no communication. My daughter is non-verbal, but she communicates just fine. She'll pass me, I say pass, she'll throw a bowl at me if she wants food. She'll throw a bottle at me if she wants to drink. Like, no matter your age, you can communicate. And I think that needs to be really put forward. And there is no such thing as being voiceless. And you're not a voice for the voiceless.
Yeah, I think that's a good place to wrap up. I'd like to thank you both, Rose and Paul, for coming in. It's been
Thank you for
brilliant.
having us.
Yeah, thank
It's
you.
been great. Thank you very
Been lovely
much.
to talk.
Thank you for listening to Surviving Society.
To support our work, you can rate,
review and subscribe to host or produce a series of Surviving Society.
Get in touch with us via Twitter or Instagram.